What's up, Vloggy Pilots? Angry Poncho here. Vloggy Poncho here. And today I have something interesting to talk about. Today I want to tell you guys about my plans to make a Pokemon ROM hack. If you don't know what that is, it's essentially you know what Pokemon is. A ROM is a game file, usually for a mobile device like a Game Boy or something. And then a ROM hack for a Pokemon version in particular is basically using this suite of tools and all these other things I've found online to edit the game and change things in it. Like, basically, what I hope to change is what Pokemon are there, what moves Pokemon learn, the routes, the maps, what Pokemon trainers have, the plot, like everything. I mean, your ROM hacks vary. There's a whole spectrum of ROM hacks where some of them just change it so the game is the same, except you can get all the Pokemon instead of just the Pokemon for that region. And then some of them go all the way to the other end and create like a whole new region and a whole new plot line, and it's like its own game basically. It was totally separate. Well, they'll add their own Pokemon and everything. So I'm not sure exactly how far along that spectrum I'm gonna go, but I want to go pretty far. Right now I'm debating whether or not I want to make my own region. And the more I think about it, the more I start to think that might be the best way to go, because then I'll have ultimate creative control over the whole game. So I want to make, I think I will. I want to make my own region, and I want to populate it with Pokemon. But the big idea for this ROM hack, and the thing that I think is going to sort of set it apart from all the other ROM hacks that are already out there, is that I want to get all Pokemon in the same tier. And let me explain what I mean by that. If you know anything about competitive battling online, you know that Pokemon are divided into tiers based on how often they're used in competitive battling. And this sort of pretty much divides them into tiers based on how good they are, how useful they are on a team, how strong they are, their stats, their moveset, capabilities, that sort of thing. Or abilities, not capabilities. So some Pokemon like like Garchomp or something, they're way up there in the upper tiers, whereas a Pokemon like Lilligant or, I don't know, Relicanth or something, they're way down in the bottom tiers, like nobody uses those. And so there's this big division in the whole world of Pokemon of the 650 or however many are currently in existence. I don't even know. Is it like 700 some now? I spoke in a previous vlog about how there's two things I'm trying to address. I'll talk about one at a time. Let's focus on the tiers. So among fully evolved Pokemon, there's this huge discrepancy as to how strong they are. And it makes sense from a plot point of view, because you sort of put yourself in the Pokemon world and you think, okay, well, it makes sense for a Houndoom to have lower stats than a Garchomp, because Garchomp is like a dragon and for some reason we think it's like, oh, that makes sense, sure. But then sometimes it just doesn't really make sense. Like a Pokemon like Dunsparce has like tons of health, and then it's just like, oh, okay. And then sometimes the stats just seem to be like almost like a mistake, like Blissey, just like the ridiculous health stat with 10 attack. So some of them are gimmicks and everything. But the real problem is that so many of them are just useless. When you look at competitive battling tiers, last I checked, there's an Uber tier, which is like the top ones, and that's stuff like Giratina and, other really up there Pokemon like Kyogre and Rayquaza. All the legendaries are pretty much in Uber. And then you have Overused, which is the most popular battle tier, I think, and that's Pokemon like Garchomp, Alakazam, Blissey, Pokemon that have a really strong niche, like as a special attacker, a revenge killer, a wall, or whatever. And then there's everybody else. And those top two tiers maybe have a total of I want to say 60 or 70 Pokemon total for the top two tiers. And all the other Pokemon are just sort of, not as good. And when you can go out of 700 and pick out like 1/10 that are actually really good competitive battlers, but the other 90% is just kind of a big crowd of faces and names. They're not really accomplishing much. So what I want to do is I want to put all Pokemon on the same level and let them set themselves apart by their move sets, their abilities, and their, well, basically, I don't even want them to be set apart in that way. I want basically all Pokemon to be considered in the same tier. The way that I want to edit the move sets and the typing and then the attacks is so that if you looked at all the Pokemon in my ROM hack, you wouldn't be able to say, well, these 50 are really better than these 100. Like, I can pick out like an upper tier and a lower tier. I want them all to be equally usable, and I want all of them to have a place on a party. And I want all of them to have a niche on a team that people will actually want to use. So, in order to accomplish that, I'm going to try and normalize some things. Like Pokemon, I'm going to try and make every Pokemon that will be included in the ROM hack will either be an evolutionary tree of 2 or 3, so that all Pokemon will have an evolution, and some will have 2. A lot of Pokemon that are already in the game will be put in. I'm going to use a lot of the old Pokemon. I'm not going to make up more than like maybe 20 of my own, just because I need to fill in some spaces, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I'm going to try and normalize it. So Pokemon that are, let's say you have 3 tiers, like Pichu tier, Pikachu tier, and Raichu tier. All Pokemon in the Pichu tier have a base stat total of 350. All Pokemon in the Pikachu tier have a base stat total of 475. Now all Pokemon in the Raichu tier have a base stat total of 600, which is like the pseudo-legendary level, as good as Garchomp. So I think if I can take all those Pokemon and put them in one of these 3 groups based on how evolved they are. So if you have some Pokemon that only evolve twice, like Scyther and Scizor, Scyther would be in the middle and Scizor would be at the top. So the final evolution of any chain will have 600 as its base stat total, which sort of gives them all a level playing field. Now, I'm not going to take away what makes Pokemon unique. Like, if a Staraptor is known for being a fast, physical attacker, its highest stats are still going to be speed and physical attack. I'm not going to level them all out and give them all 100 and everything. That would be really boring. So they're going to retain their originality and their uniqueness without being so different that one is clearly useless and the other is clearly great. So some Pokemon will have like sort of a, they'll all be intended in different ways. They'll be like special attackers, walls, but they'll all be built to be good at something so that people will want to use them. And then, so that's the first one, is I want things to be on the same tier. And the second thing is that out of the 17 types of Pokemon, so you have all the way normal, all the way through Steel, and if you think about how many different combinations you could make with hybrid type Pokemon, like dual types, you have 17 times 17, and then you're actually counting twice if you do that whole way, so it's like divided by 2, and then times 3 for evolutionary tree, you end up getting something like 365 or so being the magic number for how many Pokemon you would need to have every evolutionary tree have 3 Pokemon, and to have each evolutionary tree, like each Pichu, Pikachu, Raichu group, represent one combination of types. So for example, if I for example had Pichu, Pikachu, and Raichu in the game, they would represent pure electric. And they would be the only pure electric Pokemon in the game. And then if I had the Garchomp evolutionary line, they would represent Dragon Ground as a combination. And they'd be the only Pokemon in the game that were a combination of Dragon and Ground typing. So, you know, and then Skarmory and the pre-evolution that I'm going to make up for it, they're going to be the only Pokemon that are both Flying and Steel. So every Pokemon will have a niche just based on its typing. And I'm going to add my own Pokemon to include the type combinations that are not currently in the game. Like, let's say, well, let's see, no Fire and Steel really have. How about Fire and or Steel and Ghost? How about that? Steel and Ghost, which I think the, what's it called? Hexcalibur? Hone Edge, I think it's called. Hexcalibur is a better name. But, so they're, Generation 6 I'll talk about in just 1 second. But, so I'm going to try and, I'm going to have a Pokemon for every type combination. Even the ones that might seem strange, I'm going to try and think of something that makes it fit together, like electric and fire as a hybrid. Like, what would that Pokemon look like? Or even worse, like ice and fire. What kind of Pokemon could possibly be a hybrid of those? I'm going to rack my brain and try and find something in the natural world or in technology or some good idea, some theme for the evolutionary tree, so that when I make up types, they're interesting and they seem like they could be real Pokemon, and they're not just obvious gimmicks to get Fire and Ice to be together. So that's what I want to do. I want to have basically a whole new game retooled. I want to make things a lot more of a level playing field so that you really do feel like you have a choice among all these Pokemon. Because I don't know about you, but when I play through one of the actual Pokemon games, I feel a little bit restricted because I want to use Pokemon that are good. And so I will never use, like if I'm playing Generation 3 or earlier, I'm not going to use an Arcanine because they're physical attackers and fire typing is only a special thing. So they don't have any good fire type attacks because they're physical attackers and fire type moves are all special. So they don't live to their potential. They're Pokemon that just don't really get there. Like Flareon is another example. A physical attacker that has fire type moves that in Generations 1 through 3 are special. So they're just not usable. I'm going to try and eliminate all of that, so none of those Pokemon in my game will be crippled in that way. So they'll all be on the same playing field, they'll all be useful, they'll all have a use and be in some niche. And then I also want to normalize the stats, everything's sort of a level playing field. Now, you might be wondering, what's the point of making a ROM hack when Generation 6 is like 2 or 3 months away? Well, I can tell you right now that everyone's always excited for the next generation of Pokemon, but if the trend continues, Generation 6 might have some innovations in terms of, ooh, it's like a 3D battle thing because it's on 3DS or whatever, or it's going to look like Pokemon Stadium, guys. It's not going to be that exciting. And like, oh, there'll be a new plot, and there'll be another Team Rocket. There'll be another male-female pair of trainers that you can play as. There'll be another rival, and it's going to be the exact same game again. And I can already see from the Pokemon that they've been releasing that they're, quite frankly, out of ideas, it seems. I think a lot of their Pokemon ideas are coming from fan creations, because there have been a lot more fan creations than there have been actual Pokemon, I think, if you go out and count them all. But look at the stuff that they've already shown, like the Kung Fu Panda Bear. I mean, now they're just ripping off other franchises. And then they've got the bird, the little, what's it called, fledging or something like that. It's just fledgling. It's another normal flying type. They added another Pidgey. Like, are you serious? There have been 1 or 2 Pokemon that are Pidgey clones in every generation, and they're still doing it. They're going to advertise like, ooh, Generation 6, 100 new Pokemon, 150 new Pokemon, or however many it is. But you know what? 3 of them are going to be a Pidgey clone evolutionary line. It's not going to be exciting. You're going to play the game and be like, yeah, it's new Pokemon. But it's like the exact same game as Generation 2 or 3 was. It's the same thing. Oh, I have a Pidgey clone. And I have my fire fighting type again. Like, you know, so it's kind of, where's it all going? They're not innovating anymore. So I'm going to try and make things different. And that's why I don't feel discouraged at all making a ROM hack in the face of Generation 6. Because my ROM hack is not going to have another fucking Pidgey clone in it. You know, it's going to have actual, unique, new ideas, you know, unique Pokemon that are more interesting than, oh, that's just another Pidgey. Or, wow, you took that from another genre or like another movie or something. So hopefully, I can really, my whole goal with this ROM hack is to totally break down any assumptions that are made about Pokemon games. Like, when you start Generation 6, you're going to have the choice of 3 Pokemon. They're going to be fire, water, and grass. You're going to have those 3 choices. Why is it always those 3? I talked about in my Problems with Pokemon video that it would make more sense if there were 5 starters, and you could have a bunch of other characters, like you'd be like a class all graduating or something. So I've got all these ideas that I'm going to try and break all the cliches, ignore all the assumptions about Pokemon, where it's like, oh, well, on the first route when you go out, there has to be a Rattata clone and a Pidgey clone so that you have weak little Pokemon to fight. Like, no, if all Pokemon are at the same level, you don't have those weak, shitty ones at the beginning that you can't even use. So the Pokemon that you run into on Route 1 will be just as cool and have just as much potential when they're evolved as the Pokemon that you fight in Victory Road, if I even call it that, you know? So that's my whole goal, is to break the mold with this, and I'm really going to shoot high. I'm going to try and make it a quality game, and to be frank, it's probably going to fall to you guys to run some tests for me. Like, once I finally have a playable version, I'm going to release it just to you pilots, and particularly you vloggy pilots, so that you can play through it and say, oh, you know, it was cool and all up until I tried to fight the third gym leader and it crashed. So I'm going to need some people to give me feedback on how it plays. So you guys will get sort of a sneak preview on it if you're willing to help me work out the bugs, which I'm sure there will be a few of them. But I'm a professional computer scientist now. I write code for a living. So I think I can make a Pokemon ROM hack with relatively few problems in it. I hope that I can have, you know, enough innovation, enough new ideas to make it really, really different and stand out. That's my goal. So it's a high goal. Hopefully you guys will support me in this. Leave me some comments if you have any good ideas or suggestions for me. And I'll happily credit any ideas I steal. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video, which I hope will be a song video.